Rain poured heavily over the city, turning streets into slippery rivers and making the night seem darker than usual. Maria wrapped her thin coat tighter around her shoulders as she ran through the soaked streets, cradling her baby close to her chest. Every step was a struggle. Her shoes were soaked, and the cold seeped through her coat, but she hardly noticed. Her focus was entirely on the tiny life she held in her arms, a life that depended on her every second. Her baby's small face was pale and fragile, and every shallow breath caused Maria's heart to tighten with fear. It had been a long day, and for Maria, it felt like an endless one. She had worked 2 jobs back to back, rushing from one to the next, barely stopping to eat or rest. Her baby, little Emily, had been sick for a few days now, but Maria didn't have enough money to take her to the hospital immediately. She had tried home remedies, warm baths, and all the advice she could gather from friends and online, but nothing seemed to help. Now, with Emily getting weaker, Maria knew she had to do something drastic. As she ran down the slick sidewalk, Maria's mind raced. She thought about the doctors she had called earlier. Most had said they couldn't help without payment up front. The thought of being turned away again filled her with dread. She knew time was slipping away and that every moment counted. She could feel Emily's tiny body trembling against hers, and the fear in her heart grew unbearable. Maria had never felt so helpless in her life. She whispered softly to Emily, trying to comfort her, even though she herself was terrified. "Hang on, baby. Mama is here. Mama won't let anything happen to you," she said, her voice breaking as tears mixed with the rain on her cheeks. The streets were almost empty at this late hour, with only a few scattered pedestrians hurrying home, heads bent under umbrellas. Maria's usual route to the hospital was blocked by construction, forcing her to take a longer, winding path. Each step was exhausting, but she pushed forward, refusing to stop. Every time Emily made a small whimper, Maria's chest tightened, and she whispered soothing words, rocking her gently as she ran. She felt like the city itself was against her, with its dark alleys and puddles that seemed to appear like traps. But nothing could stop her determination. Finally, she reached the hospital. The bright lights shining through the wet glass doors seemed like a small beacon of hope in the stormy night. Maria rushed inside, slipping on the wet floor but catching herself just in time. The warmth of the hospital lobby was a stark contrast to the cold outside, and for a brief moment, Maria felt a small flicker of relief. She quickly approached the reception desk, her voice trembling. "Please, please help my baby," she said, holding Emily out toward the nurses. "She's very sick. I don't have money, but please, she needs help." The receptionist looked at her with a mixture of pity and hesitation. "Ma'am, we need payment before we can admit her," she said gently. Maria shook her head frantically, desperation in her eyes. "I don't have any money. Please, my baby. I'll do anything. Just save her life." Her voice was almost a scream now, filled with fear and pleading. Around them, the hospital staff were busy with other patients, and Maria felt the heavy weight of rejection pressing down on her. As she spoke, a man stepped out from behind the reception desk. Jonathan Hale, a wealthy businessman known for his influence and wealth, had come to the hospital for a routine checkup for one of his relatives. He was tall and composed, his suit slightly damp from the rain outside. Jonathan had seen many people in his life asking for help, and he rarely stopped to listen. But something in Maria's voice, her raw fear and the tenderness with which she held her baby, made him pause. He watched silently as Maria rocked Emily gently, murmuring soft words of comfort. Jonathan noticed the exhaustion etched on Maria's face, the way her hair stuck to her forehead from the rain, and the intensity in her eyes that refused to give up, even in the face of helplessness. For a moment, he forgot why he had come to the hospital. He simply watched, a strange feeling stirring in his chest, a mixture of curiosity and compassion. Maria continued to plead, her voice cracking from both fear and exhaustion. "Please, please, someone help her. I can't lose her." She's all I have. I can't. I can't live without her. The desperation in her voice was so powerful that it seemed to fill the entire lobby. People nearby began to take notice, glancing at the tiny baby wrapped in a blanket and the mother who looked as though she hadn't slept in days. Jonathan stepped closer, not entirely sure why he was moving, but feeling an invisible pull toward the woman and her child. He approached Maria slowly, keeping his hands visible so she wouldn't feel threatened. I can help, he said, his voice calm but firm. Maria looked up at him, her eyes wide with a mixture of hope and disbelief. You would, she whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. Jonathan nodded. Yes. Let's get your baby the care she needs. Relief flooded Maria in a way she had not felt in days. She handed Emily to the nurses, who immediately took the baby to the emergency room. Maria followed, barely able to keep her legs moving. She kept glancing at Jonathan, who had stayed by the reception desk, observing quietly. She didn't know who he was or why he had stepped in, but in that moment, she didn't care. All that mattered was that someone was helping her baby. As the nurses worked quickly to assess Emily's condition, Maria sat in the waiting area, her hands shaking. The adrenaline from the night's events had begun to wear off, leaving her feeling drained and hollow. She stared at the door to the emergency room, her mind replaying every terrifying moment of the past few days: the high fever, the coughing, the nights she spent pacing the floor holding her baby. She had never imagined she would reach this point, standing in a hospital, pleading with strangers to save the life of her child. Jonathan stayed nearby, watching quietly. He noticed how Maria's hands trembled as she clutched her coat around her, how she bit her lip to keep from crying out of fear or exhaustion, and how every few minutes, she glanced at the emergency room door, willing Emily to be okay. He could see the depth of her love, the strength it took to keep going despite the odds stacked against her. It was clear that she had been fighting alone, and something about her courage struck a chord deep inside him. Hours passed slowly. The rain outside had not stopped, but inside the hospital, a fragile hope began to grow. The doctors and nurses worked tirelessly, and Maria refused to leave Emily's side. Jonathan occasionally checked in, asking how the baby was doing, and offering whatever support he could. Maria was hesitant at first, unsure why this stranger had stepped in to help, but she gradually realized that his presence was genuine, that he truly wanted to make a difference. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, a doctor emerged from the emergency room. Maria's heart leaped, and she ran to him. The doctor smiled gently and said, "She's stable now. She's going to be okay, thanks to quick medical attention and proper care. You did the right thing bringing her in." Relief overwhelmed Maria, and she sank into a chair, tears flowing freely. She held Emily, now resting peacefully in a small hospital crib, and whispered softly, "We made it, baby, we made it." Jonathan watched this moment quietly, a small smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. He had never expected to feel such emotion from a simple act of helping. In that hospital lobby, surrounded by the hum of medical machines and the soft murmur of nurses, a story of desperation, hope, and human connection had begun, a story that neither Maria nor Jonathan would ever forget. Jonathan Hale sat quietly in the hospital lobby, observing Maria as she remained close to Emily's crib. He had seen countless people in need during his life, yet there was something about this young mother that struck a chord in him. Her eyes carried a depth of fear, love, and determination he had rarely encountered. She was not asking for charity out of greed or laziness, she was fighting for the life of her child, and she had no one else to turn to. Maria, still trembling from the events of the night, barely noticed Jonathan watching her. Her entire focus was on Emily, who was now resting peacefully under the care of the nurses. She could feel her baby's tiny chest rise and fall, and every heartbeat brought a mix of relief and lingering anxiety. Maria knew this was just the beginning. Emily was stable for now, but the days ahead would be filled with tests, treatments, and sleepless nights. The thought weighed heavily on her, but she refused to let despair take hold. Jonathan finally spoke, his voice breaking the heavy silence. "She's a strong little one," he said quietly, almost to himself. Maria looked up, startled, her eyes meeting his. "Thank you, for helping us," she whispered, her voice still shaking. Jonathan nodded, unsure of what to say next. He wasn't used to conversations like this, where words were not about business or negotiation, but about human vulnerability and need. "I just saw someone who needed help. I couldn't walk away," he replied simply. For Maria, this stranger's words were almost unbelievable. She had spent so many nights struggling alone, wondering if anyone would ever care enough to step in when it mattered most. And here was someone she didn't even know offering assistance without hesitation. She wanted to ask more questions, to understand why he had intervened, but her exhaustion and worry for Emily held her back. She simply nodded, grateful beyond words, and returned her attention to her baby. The hours passed slowly. The nurses came and went, checking Emily's vitals, administering medications, and monitoring her breathing. Maria stayed nearby, barely moving from her seat. She hardly noticed the hospital staff going about their routine, the soft hum of medical machines, or the occasional ringing of phones. Her entire world had condensed into the small crib where her baby lay. Every time Emily stirred or made a small sound, Maria's heart leaped, and she leaned closer, whispering soothing words. Jonathan observed her carefully. He had always been a man of logic and precision, used to dealing with numbers, contracts, and profits. Yet here, in this hospital lobby, logic alone could not explain the pull he felt toward this small family. He felt a sense of responsibility he had never experienced before, a desire to ensure that this fragile life was given a chance. It was not just charity, it was something deeper, a recognition of courage, love, and the will to survive. As the night turned into early morning, Maria began to speak softly to Jonathan. I don't even know how to thank you. I have nothing to offer. You've already done so much," she said, her voice breaking. Jonathan shook his head gently. "You don't need to thank me. Just focus on your baby. That's what matters right now." Maria nodded, but her mind was racing. She couldn't help but wonder who this man was and why he had chosen to help her when so many others had turned away. The hospital was quiet now, most of the patients resting or being cared for in other rooms. Maria took a deep breath and allowed herself to sit back, feeling a rare moment of calm. For the first time in days, she felt as if she could breathe without the crushing weight of despair pressing down on her chest. She looked at Emily, watching her tiny fingers curl and uncurl, and whispered, "Mama is here. Mama won't leave you." Jonathan remained nearby, sitting in a chair across from her. He noticed the small details, the way Maria's hands shook as she adjusted the blanket around Emily, the gentle hum of a lullaby she whispered, the exhaustion etched on her face. He realized that her strength was not in her words or actions alone, but in her unwavering love for her child. It was a quiet, persistent force that had carried her through the stormy night, guiding her steps to the hospital, and now keeping her vigil at Emily's side. Hours turned into a day. The nurses brought food and water to Maria, but she barely ate, too focused on Emily to think about herself. Jonathan, concerned about her well-being, suggested she rest, but Maria shook her head. "I can't leave her. Not even for a moment," she said firmly. Jonathan respected her determination, realizing that her love for Emily outweighed her own needs. Yet he also knew that she could not sustain this alone. Over the next few hours, he quietly arranged for a small room nearby where Maria could rest while staying close to Emily. During this time, Jonathan learned more about Maria. She had moved to the city a few years ago, seeking work and a better life. She had faced many struggles, long hours, low pay, and a lack of support, but she had always persevered. Emily was her entire world, and she had done everything possible to protect and care for her. Jonathan began to see that her situation was not just about financial need, it was about resilience, courage, and the unbreakable bond between mother and child. As Emily's condition slowly stabilized, Maria allowed herself to relax slightly, leaning back in her chair with a tired but grateful sigh. She glanced at Jonathan and managed a small smile. "I don't even know your name," she said softly. Jonathan smiled faintly. "Jonathan. Jonathan Hale." Maria repeated the name, as if committing it to memory. "Thank you, Jonathan. For everything." He nodded, his expression unreadable, but inside, he felt a growing connection he hadn't anticipated. The following days were filled with hospital visits, monitoring, and small improvements in Emily's health. Maria remained steadfast, rarely leaving her baby's side. Jonathan continued to check in, quietly assisting and offering support where needed. Over time, they began to speak more, sharing small stories about their lives. Maria spoke of her dreams for Emily, her hopes for a stable life, and the fears that had haunted her through the past months. Jonathan listened, surprised by the depth of her strength and the sincerity in her words. Despite the difficult circumstances, moments of lightness emerged. Maria would laugh quietly at Emily's small gestures, and Jonathan found himself smiling at her gentle humor. They began to share small conversations about life, dreams, and the challenges they had each faced. Jonathan realized that this encounter had changed something in him. He had always believed that success and wealth defined a person's worth, but now he saw that courage, love, and compassion mattered far more. One evening, as the city lights flickered through the hospital windows, Maria whispered to Emily, "You're going to be okay, baby. I promise." Jonathan, watching from a distance, felt a rare emotion rise within him, a deep sense of admiration and respect for this young mother who had faced overwhelming odds with unwavering determination. He understood, in that quiet moment, that helping her was not just an act of charity, it was a chance to witness and honor the extraordinary strength of the human spirit. By the time Emily was discharged from the hospital, she was stronger, healthier, and more resilient than anyone could have imagined. Maria, exhausted but filled with gratitude, held her baby close, tears streaming down her cheeks. Jonathan was there as well, quietly observing the reunion, feeling a profound sense of fulfillment. The bond they had formed, born out of desperation and hope, had grown into something deeper, a connection rooted in empathy, courage, and the shared experience of witnessing life's fragility and beauty. As Maria and Emily left the hospital, Jonathan remained behind, reflecting on the events of the past days. He realized that in saving a life, he had found something he had long forgotten, the power of compassion and the joy of making a meaningful difference. Maria, holding her baby close, felt a sense of hope she hadn't felt in years. She knew that life would continue to be challenging, but with Emily by her side and the unexpected kindness she had received, she felt stronger, braver, and ready to face whatever came next. And so, a chance encounter on a rainy night had begun to change two lives forever, one mother and her child, and one man who had learned that true wealth was measured not by money, but by the love, courage, and compassion we share with others. Days turned into weeks, and life slowly began to settle into a fragile rhythm for Maria and her baby, Emily. After the hospital ordeal, Maria was still exhausted, but relief had softened the sharp edges of fear that had haunted her. Emily was healthier now, and her laughter and tiny movements brought a warmth to Maria's heart that had been absent for months. Yet, Maria knew that her struggles were far from over. She still faced financial hardships, uncertainty about the future, and the overwhelming responsibility of raising her child alone. Jonathan Hale, meanwhile, found that his involvement with Maria and Emily had unexpectedly drawn him out of his usual routine. He was a man who thrived on order, numbers, and results, but caring for another person's well-being was something entirely different. He began checking in more frequently, not out of obligation, but out of genuine concern. He would visit, bringing small gifts for Emily, offering advice, and sometimes just sitting quietly, listening as Maria spoke about her day, her fears, and her hopes. At first, Maria was wary. She had grown up learning that help often came with strings attached. She had been disappointed and let down before, and the idea of depending on someone so wealthy felt foreign, even uncomfortable. Yet Jonathan's actions were consistent. He did not ask for anything in return, he simply wanted to help. Over time, Maria began to let her guard down, realizing that his presence was not about judgment or control, but about genuine care. One evening, as Maria sat on the small sofa in her modest apartment, rocking Emily to sleep, Jonathan arrived with a bag of groceries and a few toys for the baby. Maria looked at him with surprise. "You didn't have to do this," she said softly. Jonathan smiled. "I wanted to. You've been through so much, and I thought this might make things a little easier for you." Maria felt a warmth in her chest she could not name. It was not just gratitude, it was the beginning of trust, slowly forming between them. As the weeks passed, Jonathan began to understand the depth of Maria's daily struggles. She worked tirelessly, often taking multiple part-time jobs just to cover rent, food, and Emily's needs. She rarely complained, even when exhaustion weighed heavily on her shoulders. She would wake at dawn to prepare for her day, dress Emily, and head out to work, all while carrying the emotional weight of the recent medical crisis. Jonathan could see the toll it took on her, yet he also saw the unbreakable love she had for her child. It was a strength he had never truly witnessed before. One rainy afternoon, Maria returned from her job at a small cafe, her coat dripping, her shoes muddy. Emily was napping, and Jonathan had stopped by to check in. "You've been working too hard," he said gently. Maria shook her head, managing a tired smile. "I have to. I have responsibilities. I have to make sure Emily is taken care of." Jonathan nodded, understanding, but he also felt an urge to help her carry some of the weight. "You don't have to do it alone," he said quietly. Maria looked at him, and for the first time, she realized that his concern was not temporary or superficial. It was steady, like a lifeline she could reach for when needed. Their conversations grew longer and deeper. Maria spoke of her dreams for Emily, her wish to provide a better life, and her fear of failing as a mother. Jonathan, in turn, shared pieces of his own life stories of a childhood filled with expectations, loneliness, and the constant pursuit of success. He had always believed that wealth and achievement defined a person, but seeing Maria's courage and selflessness challenged his assumptions. He realized that true richness came not from possessions or power, but from love, empathy, and human connection. One evening, as the city lights reflected off the wet streets outside Maria's window, they sat together quietly, Emily sleeping peacefully nearby. Maria spoke softly, "Sometimes I wonder if I'll ever be able to give her the life she deserves. I work so hard, but it never feels enough." Jonathan listened intently. "You are giving her more than anything money could buy," he said. "You are giving her love, strength, and hope. That is far more valuable than any gift I could provide." Maria's eyes filled with tears, but this time they were tears of relief, of understanding, and of appreciation for someone who truly saw her efforts. As their bond grew, Jonathan began to consider ways he could provide longer-term support. He arranged for Emily to have regular medical check-ups, ensured that Maria had access to resources for childcare, and even helped her find opportunities to improve her work situation. He never imposed his presence or authority, he simply offered guidance and assistance, always respecting Maria's independence and dignity. Maria, in turn, found herself relying on his wisdom and kindness, realizing that asking for help did not make her weak, it made her stronger. One afternoon, while walking through a nearby park with Emily in a stroller, Maria reflected on how much had changed in such a short time. She had felt hopeless and alone during that stormy night at the hospital, but now she could see a path forward. She was no longer isolated, she had allies, support, and, most importantly, the knowledge that she could survive even the most challenging circumstances. Jonathan walked beside her, not as a savior, but as a companion on this journey, offering encouragement and understanding. Jonathan, too, noticed changes within himself. The days spent helping Maria and Emily had awakened a side of him he had long ignored, a side capable of empathy, patience, and selfless care. He found himself looking forward to their conversations, cherishing the moments when he could witness the small victories of everyday life, Emily's first steps, her laughter during play, or Maria's quiet sigh of relief after a long day. These experiences reminded him of the importance of human connection and the profound impact of kindness. As time went on, Maria began to regain confidence in her own abilities. She discovered new strength within herself, fueled not only by love for Emily but also by the support she received from Jonathan and others who had quietly stepped in to help. She started setting small goals, finding a more stable job, creating a routine for Emily, and building a safe and loving home environment. Each achievement, no matter how small, was a victory that reminded her that she was capable of overcoming adversity. Their relationship, built on mutual respect and shared experiences, grew into a deep friendship. They laughed together over small, everyday moments, shared stories of past struggles, and supported each other in times of uncertainty. Jonathan admired Maria's resilience and determination, while Maria appreciated Jonathan's genuine care and steady presence. In a world that often seemed harsh and unforgiving, they had found in each other a source of hope and stability. One morning, as Maria prepared breakfast for Emily, she paused for a moment to look around her small apartment. It was simple, modest, but filled with love. She thought about the stormy night when everything had seemed hopeless, and she felt a sense of gratitude so deep it brought tears to her eyes. She realized that the path to a better life was not always easy, but with determination, love, and the kindness of others, she could navigate even the most difficult challenges. Jonathan, meanwhile, reflected on his own life. He had achieved wealth and success, but it had always been a solitary pursuit. His days had been filled with meetings, negotiations, and the constant pressure to perform. Yet in witnessing Maria's courage and Emily's innocence, he had discovered a new sense of purpose. He understood that the true value of life lay not in material possessions, but in the relationships we build and the impact we have on others. As Emily played with her small toys, Maria smiled, feeling a sense of peace she had not known in months. Jonathan watched from the corner of the room, a quiet satisfaction settling over him. Together, they had faced fear, uncertainty, and challenges that seemed insurmountable. And yet, through courage, love, and unwavering support, they had created a new beginning, a life filled with hope, resilience, and the promise of brighter days ahead. It was a time of transformation for all of them. Maria had grown stronger, learning to balance her responsibilities with self-care and trust in others. Jonathan had discovered the profound joy of giving without expectation, the fulfillment that comes from witnessing growth and healing. And Emily, the tiny heart that had brought them together, thrived in the warmth of love and security that surrounded her. The weeks passed with small victories and moments of joy. Each day brought a new opportunity for growth, a new challenge to overcome, and a reminder of the extraordinary resilience of the human spirit. Maria and Jonathan continued their journey together, united by circumstance but strengthened by mutual respect and compassion. They learned that even in the face of hardship, kindness and perseverance could create a future filled with hope. And so, what had begun as a desperate plea in a hospital lobby had blossomed into a story of transformation, connection, and hope. Maria, Emily, and Jonathan had formed an unlikely trio, bound by love, empathy, and the shared experience of overcoming adversity. The bond they had built would continue to shape their lives, reminding them that even in the darkest moments, there is always the possibility of light, love, and a new beginning. The following months brought both challenges and unexpected joys for Maria, Emily, and Jonathan. Life had settled into a rhythm, but it was far from perfect. Maria continued to work tirelessly, balancing multiple jobs while making sure Emily's needs were met. Her days began before sunrise and often ended late at night, yet she never complained. Her love for Emily was the driving force behind every choice she made, every sacrifice she endured. And Jonathan, who had once been a stranger with resources, had become a constant presence in their lives, quietly supporting them in ways Maria had never imagined. Jonathan had learned much about patience and empathy during this time. He had always prided himself on his efficiency and success in business, but life with Maria and Emily taught him lessons that no boardroom could provide. He discovered the strength of human resilience and the profound impact of unconditional care. Each visit to Maria's apartment, each evening spent helping with Emily, reminded him that the world held more value than money and power. It held connections, love, and the quiet victories of everyday life. One rainy afternoon, Maria returned home exhausted from a long day at work. Emily was napping, and the apartment was quiet except for the faint hum of the heater. Jonathan had arrived earlier, quietly preparing a small meal for them both. He had also placed a few new books and toys for Emily on the small table near the crib. Maria paused at the doorway, her eyes softening at the sight. "You really didn't have to," she whispered. Jonathan shrugged lightly, a small smile tugging at his lips. "I wanted to. You've been doing so much on your own, this is just a little help." As Maria settled into the small couch with Emily on her lap, she felt a mixture of exhaustion and relief. Jonathan joined her, sitting quietly nearby. They watched Emily stir and yawn, her tiny hands reaching out for the toys. Maria spoke softly, "I don't know how to repay you. You've done so much for us. I feel like I'm always taking, always asking for help." Jonathan shook his head gently. "You're not taking anything you don't deserve. You're a mother doing everything for your child. Helping you is the right thing to do." Maria's eyes filled with tears, but they were not tears of sadness, they were tears of understanding and gratitude. Over time, their conversations grew deeper and more personal. Maria spoke about the fears that had haunted her during the hardest days, fears of failing Emily, of being alone, of the world being too harsh for a small child. Jonathan listened intently, never interrupting, never judging. He realized that her struggles were not only about financial hardship but also about emotional endurance. Maria had endured sleepless nights, constant worry, and the weight of responsibility without complaint. Her courage and resilience had left a lasting impression on him. Jonathan, too, began to share parts of his life. He spoke of his childhood, the pressure to succeed, and the loneliness that had often accompanied his achievements. He had always believed that wealth and success were the most important measures of life, but watching Maria navigate her challenges with love and determination made him question everything he had valued. He saw a richness in her courage, a depth in her compassion, and a strength in her heart that he had never encountered before. One evening, as the city lights reflected off the rain-soaked streets outside, Maria and Jonathan sat together on the small balcony of her apartment. Emily slept soundly in her crib nearby. Maria spoke softly, almost to herself, "Sometimes I wonder if I'll ever be able to give Emily everything she deserves. I want to protect her from every hardship, but life is so unpredictable." Jonathan reached out and placed a hand gently on hers. "You've already given her the most important things, love, care, and security. Those are things no money can buy." Maria looked into his eyes and saw sincerity there. She realized that Jonathan's presence had become more than support, he had become someone she could trust, someone who genuinely cared. The bond between them continued to deepen. Jonathan began to see Maria not just as a mother in need, but as a person of remarkable strength and quiet grace. He admired her ability to remain hopeful despite adversity, her determination to provide a better life for Emily, and her unwavering compassion. Maria, in turn, came to rely on Jonathan's steady presence, his guidance, and the quiet reassurance that someone was watching over them. Their relationship was built on mutual respect and trust, growing naturally over time. One afternoon, Maria returned from work to find Jonathan playing quietly with Emily on the living room floor. Emily laughed, her tiny hands reaching out to touch his face. Maria's heart swelled with warmth at the sight. She realized how far they had come from that desperate night in the hospital to now, when laughter and joy could fill their small apartment. It was a moment of hope, a reminder that even the darkest nights could lead to brighter days. Jonathan noticed the change in Maria as well. She had grown stronger, more confident, and more assured in her abilities as a mother. He saw the way she smiled when Emily laughed, the way her eyes softened when she held her child, and the quiet pride she carried despite the hardships she faced. He realized that helping her had not only changed her life but had also changed him. He had learned to value love, patience, and connection over wealth and success. Their shared moments were not always easy. There were still challenges: financial struggles, medical concerns, and the constant balancing act of work and parenting. But together, they faced these challenges with determination and resilience. Jonathan provided practical support, while Maria offered strength and insight. They learned from each other, growing in understanding and appreciation for the different ways they approached life. One rainy evening, as thunder rumbled softly in the distance, Maria spoke of her fears and hopes. "I worry that I won't be able to give Emily the life I want for her," she admitted. Jonathan took her hand and held it firmly. "You are giving her something far more important than material things. You are giving her love, courage, and hope. Those are the things that shape a life." Maria felt a surge of gratitude and relief. For the first time in months, she felt that the future was not something to fear but something to embrace. As the weeks passed, Maria began to open her heart more fully to Jonathan, realizing that his involvement in their lives was not only about support but also about genuine care and companionship. She trusted him in ways she had never trusted anyone, sharing her thoughts, fears, and dreams. Jonathan, too, found that he was drawn to Maria's strength, kindness, and determination. He admired her ability to remain resilient and compassionate, even in the face of overwhelming challenges. Their connection became a source of strength for both of them. Maria gained confidence, knowing she was not alone in her struggles, while Jonathan discovered a sense of purpose and fulfillment that he had never experienced before. They celebrated small victories together: the first time Emily spoke her name clearly, the first steps she took, and the quiet moments of laughter that filled their home. Each moment reinforced the bond they shared, a bond built on trust, respect, and genuine care. One morning, as Emily played quietly on the floor, Maria reflected on how far they had come. She remembered the stormy night at the hospital, the fear and uncertainty that had consumed her, and the stranger who had stepped in to help. Now, months later, that stranger had become a steadfast presence in their lives. She realized that their journey together was not just about survival but about growth, connection, and the power of kindness. Jonathan watched Maria with quiet admiration. He saw the way she cared for Emily, the way she carried herself with strength and dignity, and the way she faced life's challenges with courage. He realized that in helping her, he had discovered a part of himself he had long neglected, a part capable of empathy, patience, and selfless care. He understood that true success was not measured by wealth or status, but by the impact we have on the lives of others. As Emily grew stronger and more independent, Maria and Jonathan continued to navigate life together. They faced challenges, celebrated victories, and shared countless quiet moments of joy and connection. Their bond deepened, rooted in trust, respect, and a shared understanding of the hardships and triumphs of life. Together, they had created a small world filled with love, hope, and resilience. The transformation was clear. Maria had grown into a more confident and empowered mother, capable of facing life's challenges with grace and determination. Jonathan had learned the value of compassion, empathy, and human connection. And Emily, the tiny child who had once been so fragile, thrived in the warmth of love and security that surrounded her. What had begun as a desperate plea in a hospital lobby had blossomed into a story of resilience, connection, and hope. Maria, Emily, and Jonathan had formed a bond that would continue to shape their lives, reminding them that even in the darkest moments, kindness, love, and determination could create a brighter future. And so, the turning point of their journey had arrived. Through shared struggles and moments of vulnerability, Maria and Jonathan discovered a deep and lasting connection, a bond that went beyond circumstance, rooted in trust, compassion, and the extraordinary strength of the human heart. Together, they faced the future with courage, hope, and the certainty that no challenge was insurmountable when love and support guided the way. Life had gradually transformed for Maria and Emily, but the changes were most profound in Maria herself. She had faced one of the most terrifying experiences of her life, the possibility of losing her child, and had emerged stronger, more determined, and more resilient than she had ever imagined. Every day was still a struggle, but now there was hope and support to balance the challenges. Emily thrived under her care, her laughter and curiosity filling their small apartment with warmth and joy. Maria often paused to watch her daughter play, feeling a profound sense of gratitude for the second chance they had been given. Jonathan remained a constant presence in their lives, quietly supporting them in ways that went beyond material help. He ensured Emily received regular medical care and helped Maria manage the daily demands of work and parenting. But his presence had become more than guidance, it had become companionship, a source of emotional support and encouragement. Maria had come to trust him implicitly, not just for what he could provide but for who he was as a person. He had proven time and time again that his care was genuine and unwavering. One sunny morning, Maria prepared breakfast for Emily while Jonathan arranged a small corner of the living room as a play area for the child. Emily giggled, reaching for the colorful toys Jonathan had brought, and Maria couldn't help but smile at the sight. The past months had been filled with small victories, Emily's first words, her first steps, and her growing curiosity about the world. Each milestone was a reminder of how far they had come, a testament to Maria's love and Jonathan's quiet support. As they sat together, Jonathan and Maria shared a rare moment of stillness. The world outside continued its busy rhythm, but inside their home, there was a sense of calm and stability. Maria spoke softly, "I never thought things could feel this peaceful. After everything we've been through, I feel like we've finally found a place where we belong." Jonathan nodded, understanding the weight of her words. "You've built this, Maria. You've been the one guiding Emily through every challenge. I've only been here to help when you needed it." Over time, Maria realized that Jonathan's role in their lives had grown beyond what she had expected. He was not just a helper, he had become a trusted friend, someone who offered support without judgment, guidance without imposing control, and a sense of stability she had longed for. She found herself opening up to him in ways she had never shared with anyone else, speaking of her fears, her dreams, and her hopes for Emily's future. Jonathan, in turn, shared his own reflections, revealing the ways Maria's courage and resilience had changed him. One evening, as the city lights flickered through the windows, Maria and Jonathan sat together on the balcony, Emily asleep in her crib nearby. The air was cool, and the quiet of the night felt comforting. Maria spoke softly, "I sometimes think about the night we first met at the hospital. I was so scared, so helpless. I never imagined things could turn out like this." Jonathan looked at her, his expression calm but thoughtful. "That night changed all of us. You taught me what true courage and love look like. Emily reminded me of the importance of hope and patience." Maria smiled, feeling a deep connection she could not put into words. Their bond continued to grow, rooted in trust, understanding, and shared experiences. Jonathan had come to admire Maria not only for her strength as a mother but also for her integrity, compassion, and unwavering determination. Maria, in turn, respected Jonathan for his willingness to learn, his patience, and his quiet but consistent support. Together, they had created a small world in which Emily could thrive, a world filled with safety, love, and the reassurance that they were not alone. As Emily grew older, she became more curious and active, exploring her surroundings with wide-eyed wonder. Maria watched her closely, often holding her hand as they walked in the park or played in the apartment. Jonathan occasionally joined them, delighting in the small joys of family life that he had once overlooked. He found himself laughing more freely, appreciating the simplicity of these moments, and realizing that happiness often came from the connections we share rather than material possessions or achievements. One afternoon, Maria and Jonathan took Emily to a small library in their neighborhood. Emily's eyes lit up at the sight of colorful books, and she ran from shelf to shelf, pointing excitedly at the pictures. Maria watched her, feeling a mixture of pride and relief. She had worked so hard to give Emily the stability and opportunities she deserved, and seeing her daughter's excitement reminded her that every sacrifice had been worth it. Jonathan stood nearby, smiling quietly, feeling the warmth of family and connection that had become so important in his life. Over time, Jonathan also began to explore ways to make a broader impact. Inspired by Maria's resilience and the struggles she had faced, he started initiatives to help other families in need, providing resources for healthcare, education, and essential support. He realized that the lessons he had learned from Maria and Emily could extend far beyond their own lives. By creating opportunities for others, he could honor the journey they had shared and ensure that more people received the help they deserved. Maria continued to work hard, but now she did so with a sense of hope and purpose that had been absent in the past. She enrolled in evening classes to improve her skills and increase her earning potential, determined to provide Emily with a better future. Jonathan supported her quietly, offering encouragement and helping with practical matters when needed. Together, they navigated life's challenges, celebrating each small achievement and milestone with gratitude and joy. As Emily's first birthday approached, Maria and Jonathan planned a small celebration. The apartment was decorated with colorful balloons, and Emily's laughter filled the air as she played with new toys and explored her surroundings. Maria watched her daughter, tears of happiness in her eyes, and realized how far they had come from that desperate night in the hospital. Jonathan, standing beside her, felt a deep sense of fulfillment and connection. They had both been transformed by this journey, learning the true value of love, compassion, and resilience. During the celebration, Maria spoke softly to Jonathan, "I never imagined we could have come this far. You've changed our lives in ways I can't even describe." Jonathan smiled, his eyes reflecting the quiet pride he felt. "We've changed each other. And most importantly, Emily has shown us both the power of love and hope." Maria nodded, feeling a profound sense of gratitude and connection. As the evening drew to a close, Maria held Emily close, feeling her tiny heartbeat against her chest. She reflected on the journey they had undertaken, the fear, the uncertainty, the moments of despair, and the small victories that had led them to this moment. She realized that while life would continue to bring challenges, they now had the strength, support, and love to face whatever came next. Jonathan, watching the two of them, felt a deep sense of purpose and fulfillment. He had entered their lives as a stranger, a wealthy man with the ability to provide assistance, but he had gained far more than he had ever expected. He had learned to value compassion over success, connection over wealth, and the transformative power of love. Together, they had created a family, not defined by circumstance but by care, support, and mutual respect. The days that followed were filled with continued growth and bonding. Maria pursued her goals with renewed determination, Jonathan remained a steadfast source of support, and Emily continued to thrive in the warmth and security of their home. They had faced fear, uncertainty, and hardship, yet through perseverance, trust, and the unbreakable bonds they had formed, they had built a life filled with hope, resilience, and joy. In quiet moments, Maria reflected on the journey that had brought them here. From the desperate plea in the hospital lobby to the challenges of rebuilding their lives, she realized that love, courage, and compassion had carried them through. She understood that while hardships would continue, the strength they had gained and the connections they had built would guide them forward. Jonathan also reflected on the transformation. He had entered Maria's life as a helper, but he had found friendship, purpose, and a renewed sense of humanity. He had witnessed courage in its purest form and had been inspired to make a positive impact beyond their small circle. Together, they had created a story of hope, resilience, and the enduring power of human connection. As evening fell and the city lights glimmered outside, Maria, Emily, and Jonathan sat together, enjoying a rare moment of calm. Emily's tiny fingers wrapped around Maria's hand, Jonathan's hand rested gently on Maria's shoulder, and in that quiet space, they felt the profound truth of their journey, that love, support, and compassion could transform lives, heal wounds, and create a future filled with promise. The story that began with fear and desperation had reached a point of hope, joy, and connection. Maria had grown stronger, Emily had flourished, and Jonathan had discovered a depth of humanity he had never known. Together, they had created a life that honored courage, resilience, and the extraordinary impact of kindness. And so, the journey concluded not with an ending, but with a continuation of life, love, and hope. Maria, Emily, and Jonathan had learned that even in the darkest moments, the human heart had the capacity to endure, to care, and to create a future filled with light. They had discovered that true wealth lay not in material possessions, but in love, trust, and the bonds we share with others. Their story remained a testament to the power of compassion, the strength of the human spirit, and the transformative potential of kindness. Through their experiences, they had learned that every challenge could be met with courage, every hardship softened by support, and every moment of fear balanced by hope. And in the quiet of their small apartment, as Emily drifted into sleep and Maria and Jonathan watched over her, the promise of tomorrow felt bright, full of opportunity, and filled with the enduring power of love.